This week, we're joined by Sven Schmidt from Germany. He is the CEO of Artiminds. We're going to be covering an amazing number of topics. One of the more interesting things that he talked about today was actually the STEAM scholarship that's available in Germany. And this allows startups to essentially have a little bit of running room in financing after, say, like their founders graduate from like a PhD program or something like that. So Sven actually used that in his few years after school to be able to form Artiminds, which I thought was amazing.
We also discuss connectivity, concerns about communication, as well as privacy when it comes to being fully connected wirelessly or wired to the internet. We discuss about the future of the manufacturing floor and what Artiminds is doing from a flexible automation standpoint to make sure that they can be one of the first to the market from a flexible automation to cover their customers' needs. We talk about teleoperation and how COVID has really changed the world and how we do business from a support standpoint, which has not really been talked about so far.
Yeah, Sven is a pretty amazing guy. He's a blend of high business acumen and also a true roboticist, understanding everything about robots from the lowest level of control loop all the way up to the usability of an end user. And I thought when he drew particular attention to the barriers to using neural networks or something for robotics, it's not quite as simple as I think a lot of people think. And there's going to be a lot more that's needed to get there. And he really talked about more data needing to come off the robot in order to make neural networks and any kind of AI actually work. So I thought that was an interesting part.
Absolutely. Well, please give us a listen and enjoy.
Really?
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders Podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.
Sven, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Maybe I could do a brief introduction.
Perfect. Yes.
Cool. So today we're joined by Sven from Artiminds. He's the CEO of his company. They're based out of Germany, and he's going to be talking to us about not just his personal life and how he got into robotics as a roboticist for one of the, I would say, more premier technology companies for robotics out there, but also how he grew Artiminds into the powerhouse that it is today. So thank you very much for joining us today, Sven.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's nice to be here. So I was born in Heidelberg in Germany nearly 40 years ago now. We'll be turning 40 this year. And so I discovered my interest, of course, in technical stuff early on. I think like many people going into a technical career. So playing with Lego as a child, Lego robots were also something I was very fancy about when I was say 7, 8 years old. And so I discovered computer science at the end of my teenage years, about 15, 16 years old, not just playing computer, but programming. And very rapidly, I got fond of machines that interact physically with the world. So for me, always for programming, when I try to program some small computer games, stuff like that,
Sure.
It was always a little bit boring to interact with this program through just a screen and a keyboard. And that was a very important motivator for me to move towards computer programs, basically, which interact with the world through sensors and actors. And so my wish to really do robotics as a career formed around end of high school. And it's noted in my high school yearbook of my class that I wanted to become an entrepreneur in robotics. It states it in one sentence. So it was my aim from the graduation of my high school on. And so I basically chose computer science because I was always more interested in the software side of robotics, in the information processing, and not so much in the mechatronics and the mechanical engineering. And so I went to Karlsruhe, which was already back then, one of the big 3 robotics computer science universities in Germany, together with Munich and Aachen. And And yeah, so I became a HEVI, an undergraduate research assistant, quite early in studies, very early on. This is now 18 and a half years ago, in October
Wow,
2000.
Very cool.
I
That's really
started
cool story.
programming a pertains. It was a pertains. We had a pertains there, and it's now here actually in my office, but I cannot turn the camera. But the whole robot from back then, the service robot, it was given to us as a museum piece. The pertains, three-fingered hand with a force torque sensor from DLR and the Amtech lightweight robot arm with 7 joints. Was in 2002 that the institute got this robotic system and then put it on a torso and put a self-built mobile platform under it. And this robot, yeah, it's very ugly, so I wouldn't put it in the camera, but it had everything back then. It had 3D vision, an early Swiss Ranger 2000 3D camera, awful data, really awful, but it was 3D. It was something very great back then. 2D stereo camera system, and of course a manipulator with multi-finger, with strain sensors in the fingers, with a force torque sensor 6D in the wrist, and a mobile platform with a laser sensor and some early SLAM. And so we could do for 10 years. I worked with
So many questions for you already. Maybe we could ask you a couple, if we can. So when you were first getting started in high school, were there programs like for robotics in high school in Germany? I know in the United States we have something called FIRST robotics, and I don't know if those were around back then or if you were trying to figure this all out yourself.
No, they exist now. I actually know someone in Karlsruhe who had pushed it to all the schools in the region, an entrepreneur, a very great robot school project. No, it didn't exist back then, but we had a good computer science class in the last 2 years of school, which advanced me quite a lot from this meddling around at home. And I'm very grateful with this teacher. He put it nearly to university level, really algorithmic. We had a program in the exams on paper, very, very demanding. And yeah, it built me to a better programmer before starting to study.
What kind of hardware did you have? I mean, was it working with stepper motors and like simple things like that, or what kind of platforms?
So the robotics
Arduino wasn't a thing then,
the robotics I started at the very end of high school with a Lego Mindstorms actually, and then when I got into university, a goal to have this undergraduate job was to have really good hardware to work with. So that's why I went very quickly to this university side job to have good hardware. So before graduation, it was mostly programming without real robots. Was a lot of programming, but that's what I wanted to leave behind. But there were not so many opportunities beyond the Lego Mindstorm. At least I was not able to find any.
Lego Mindstorm, another person, we've heard that before, and it's pretty amazing how many roboticists that have been bred from Lego Mindstorm.
Yeah, I still have it somewhere in my cupboard.
Do you have children, Sven?
No.
I was going to say that would be a good present for them, perhaps.
Yeah,
but
sure.
And I'm sorry, what university did you say you went to in Germany?
Karlsruhe. Here in Karlsruhe, the University of Karlsruhe Technical University. Today it's called Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. They rebranded themselves, I think, in 2007 or 8. But when I started, it was still called university, and it's still the same stuff, basically.
Very cool.
Yeah, very good. And then you were talking about your first robot, and you mentioned so many keywords that I think we need to go through again. So you said force torque sensor, you said SLAM, you said manipulator. I think you said 7 degrees of freedom as well.
Yeah.
Can you take us through that a little bit more?
Yeah. So basically, it was it emerged from around 2002 to 2004 with the PhD students. We built this to a whole machine. It became a full service robot with basically from the ground a mobile platform with wheels, with a laser scanner encoder so that it could make a map and drive around with everything on top. Then a torso with all the computers in it, so it could really compute everything on board. And then one arm attached to its shoulder, which was an Amtech lightweight robot, a very grandfather of lightweight robots from the company Amtech, was later bought by Schunk. And it had 7 degrees of freedom, or it still has it, but it doesn't move anymore. And then of course, torque sensor at the wrist, like you have it today with cobots. Yeah, it looks right to this direction, and then a pertains with a three-finger gripper. So, and of course, a head with 2D and 3D cameras. So basically, a lot of stuff already that today gets more and more used in industrial applications. It was 18 years ago. Yeah,
that's amazing. So you said it was like or basically right around 2000 that this was all taking
Yeah,
place?
2002, the most components arrived, and then the institute will build it together, and was quite pioneer work. Back then, not many people had such robots.
Yep.
It was very rare, and so I was very blessed in the 2000s, although it's very ugly, to make a lot of experiments. So because then my PhD later was in probabilistic decision making of this robot. I've always dreamed of AI, and you couldn't use
Yeah.
the word AI back then. It was, AI winter, so you always had to call it differently, but that was it. Have autonomously acting robot that looks around what to do next, ask the human something, look for a chair, find the chair, grasp the chair, pull the chair, find the cup, take the cup to the human, gave it to the human, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, so it was very blessed.
Are you guys doing a lot of that type of like neural network, artificial intelligence stuff now?
Yes, again, you can say, so we have an innovation lab now in Artiminds where we have also even PhD student, and we have research projects with universities where we always continue to push the next next generation after that of technology.
Sure.
So that's where we do a lot of machine and deep learning. In our current products, commercially on the market, it's still limited, but we are always doing pre-development research.
But you're thinking about the future.
We're working on it. We're actively working on it. We'll publish a paper on ICRA. It's accepted, so we will have a nice paper on ICRA now this June, which will where we will show some of these deep learning on more industrial tasks. Yeah.
Very cool. I saw. So I don't know if you know Daryl Adams. He was worked at UR, and he left, and he works at Gideon Brothers now. They're out of Croatia. They're a mobile robot company. I think we're gonna actually have him on here at some point. But he sent me a video of Covariant and the founder of Covariant, and the name escapes me. My audio is not coming through, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, it might sound like it's through the computer.
Yeah, really. Does that sound better?
Yeah, that sounds fine, I guess. Yeah.
All right, because that definitely is coming through the condenser. So, anyways, so he sent me a video from the founder of Covariant, who is was talking. I think it was a video released recently that they put out talking about artificial intelligence, and the whole premise of it was talking about the neural networks and how and putting that into like everyday life, right? Obviously, their focus is really in automating like e-commerce and in that area of like warehouse, but looking at how you get robots into outside of even manufacturing, but into more commercial applications. They really have to have deep learning, right? There's like, if you're in a house, you can't, there's just too much variability. The things change all the time. You have to be able to like recognize what's going on and make a decision, versus what we often see on the manufacturing floor as it's a simple logic loop that is only going to last for, maybe 50 lines of code that can make decisions for, what's going on. But it's a few if-then statements, right? It's not a neural network or, artificial intelligence with deep learning, which obviously is going to come into play. So what applications have you guys seen as like the forefront? Because I think it'll probably come into manufacturing first before it goes into commercial applications. So I'm just curious of what applications you guys are seeing as areas that need deep learning.
Yeah, so first of all, of course, the deep learning alone is a little bit limited if you don't have a structure, a knowledge-based AI on top. And that was, for me, a long time criticism about the deep learning trend, especially for robotics, where you have often not a lot of data, but very high dimensional problems. And now the technology is finally coming to the place where these symbolic approaches are merged with the deep learning approaches. And that's also what we follow in our lab.
What does symbolic mean versus what do you mean by symbolic?
Yeah, I mean that there's an explicit model-based representation of some parts of the problem, quantified or also symbolic, and that this explicit representation is there, and it somehow is coordinated with the neural network parts. For example, that you just have some parameters in a symbolic model that is learned by the neural network, or that you have other approaches that more directly link it together. That's actually what we follow. So my PhD 10 years ago was still very much explicit symbolic AI with probabilistic processes. That was back then the way to do it. And it always lacked the flexibility that now deep learning brings. But pure reinforcement or non-reinforcement based deep learning without anything symbolic in it or model based in it is very weak if you have very high dimensional, very complex structured problems and not data. And so this is now coming together, and the applications we see is, of course, if you have very small lot sizes, basically types of auto configuration, so that you get away from intuitive programming to some parts of self-programming, of a still somewhat classical task with force or vision-based adaptation, reflexes, but also things like adapting to very complex problems, surface treatment, like grinding or polishing or other tasks, where you also want to avoid then models of the workpiece or of the process. So that's where we see basically AI-based approaches coming step by step into the manufacturing world. And we very strongly believe in the step by step and not doing one big, general AI approach and one big project, and it can solve everything. This domain is too complicated. So doing step by step, and that's what we follow.
Interesting. Can you expand more on the idea of not having enough data? I'm not sure that I've heard it like that before. And it seems like, at least from looking at it from my side, that there's a ton of data out there, but maybe it's not enough data to do real reinforcement learning or something. So what kind of data would you look for in like an optimal
very simple. If you say you have one process in somewhere on a shop floor, where one robot and you want to solve something, some assembly, some plugging something in or deburring a contour or something, and you need some sensor-based adaptation, the path has to be controlled, control parameters need to be something, some strategy, how to control it, how to plan the path, stuff like that. If you do a ramp up, 1,000 cycles is still quite a lot in a ramp up. 1,000 data examples compared to some vision learning, it's a drop in the bucket. It's hundreds of thousands or millions often. And so, of course, and you can say you can use transfer learning. You have similar different problems, that you can all combine into one learning bag, so to say, use federated learning, all this kind of stuff, but it's not easy to orchestrate in practice. You don't have 100 of the similar applications in the same company with same system integrator or ramp up team that you just can pool. It's not like with, for example, vision-based learning, as there are much higher obstacles to gather the data, and on the other hand, the dimensionality of the actual problems often are not so much lower than if you want to detect some speech or vision, some image or something. And so this is a big limitation, but I'm very confident that current approaches that bring together prior knowledge and with the deep learning power will overcome these challenges.
Yeah,
interesting.
Like, one of the first applications that I saw was probably 2017. And well, not to mention, I guess when I worked at Cognex, ViDi had come out or had just come out right after I had left. So it was really interesting to see the machine learning aspect within the kind of standard computer vision world and or self standalone vision system. And what was interesting is a company out of Quebec called Omni Robotics. I don't know if you're familiar with them. The CEO there is Francois, and he showed me what they were targeting, and essentially his whole idea was saying that typically when you automate something, you look from an industrial application, you look at something as very low mix, very high volume, right? And when we look at the manufacturing floor, I think collaborative robots really filled a void where we said, okay, here's something that is maybe high mix, low volume. And I think that there's like artificial intelligence in deep learning, can really provide an area where it's extremely high mix, where it's everything is mixed and the volume is, single piece, one piece. And so it takes that kind of that top of the line of what you saw previously, all the way down to a lot of one. And I think that that's really what's interesting as we pursue these. So I don't know if you're seeing, if you see similar path forward.
Sounds like Sven is saying that that's a bit of a problem right now, that we're not quite there yet. We need more data to train these low mix applications, and it almost needs to be pre-trained, from prior applications. Like the artificial intelligence needs to come in with some kind of existing knowledge to be able to have it work kind of the first time around. Is that correct, Sven?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but again, then of course, if you can build some more powerful systems that can use a lot of prior knowledge from similar tasks, then it should be able to deduce, a solution for their current problem, if it's not too dissimilar from the prior knowledge, that solves it. And that's AI. I mean, it uses knowledge and learning and sensing together, to get to novel solutions. That's intelligence in my point of view. And exactly as Zach said, going towards lot size 1, I mean, even lot size 100 is often very low, for automation. So often, I mean, lot size 1 is and lot size 100 are nearly equivalent from this point of view. There is a lot of potential, but additionally, I see the potential to do less mechanical engineering. That's weird. We always say with Artiminds that sensor-based robotics, with 2D or 3D vision cameras, laser scanners, and force sensing enables to be a lot less complex with the mechanical structures, grippers, fixtures, environment. The same thing that the general cobot trend also orchestrates. And so I think AI can push that even further for complex problems. And I think these are the two main directions: smaller lot sizes and less complex mechanical engineering. Both together are flexibility. The end result is flexibility. I mean, that's what it's all about: a flexible automation, really flexible automation. So we can reconfigure itself and everything like that. And that needs these AI techniques, to really become fruition in a broad way, in a very successful way.
When your company is looking to sell software for robotics, do you look to particular applications, or are you willing to entertain almost any application that might come across?
Yeah, so where we have most experience and the biggest USP are a lot of assembly type applications with some fixed work pieces, but some tolerances, but also especially flexible work pieces. But also now more and more also different kinds of surface treatment, like deburring, grinding, polishing. These kind of applications become more and more exciting, where now the technology also from the tools and everything moves towards a broader usability, also in smaller lot sizes, but also complex handling. And laboratory, we have customers. So if it's manufacturing in the broadest sense, we have quite a lot of applications of different types in the field running in production. In logistics, we are less present. So for example, fulfillment, e-commerce is not something that we focus on. There are very focused solutions that are very powerful, and has been a lot of movement in that market in the past few years. So
tremendous amounts. We were talking about this last episode. The amount of money that's going into that part of robotics is incredible. Some of the valuations of these companies as they, perhaps start to be publicly traded in some cases, or they're acquired by other companies. It's really incredible the amount of money that's going into the e-commerce market.
Yeah, and you see also very different geographic, focus. In the US, there are a lot of very strong companies in this field, and manufacturing is more in Europe. There are more new players, where you also see general, the market for fulfillment relative to manufacturing. There's a different relationship in the US and in Europe. And I thought this also plays, I think, into everything. So, but I think it's fully okay that you focus more on the topics that are stronger in your home market, or even if you have, of course, customers overseas also. I think that's fully okay.
So can you tell us, 2002, you're in school, you're, going to get your PhD, and you graduate, and do you find Artiminds right away? Like, how did your career transition into the company Artiminds? And, how did you find yourself coming to lead it? Like, how did that entire journey happen?
Yeah, of course, very, very importantly, at the beginning of my PhD, around 2007, I learned to know very, very interesting, back then students, which very quickly also became colleagues. The Rainer and Gerhard, my two co-founders. So we worked for many years at the Institute in a very fruitful manner. And I think we got to know each other and to appreciate our strengths and of course a little bit weaknesses, and find that we are very complementary, although we both all computer scientists at the lab, just from our interests. And so Rainer did a really enormously great work during his PhD, which I saw it very early, and he also later got the George Girard PhD award, which was for many years the most prestigious young academics award in robotics in Europe. It's now discontinued, but for many years, so he got it at the end for his PhD. It's very great work on programming by demonstration, coupling it with motion planning and learning. And so to be able to very flexibly parameterize complex sensor-based robot programs. And so, I mean, I was basically the closest one always looking at this, and I saw the potential. And so, as you know, I wanted to found a company when I was in high school already, and also when I was a student, and so it all came together, And so we talked, and then at the end of our PhDs, I was already a postdoc then, and when Rainer finished, so everything was set up. And in Germany, there's a founders scholarship, you could say, for the first year. Out of a research program, you get a personal scholarship for up to 3 founders. To fund your first year, and you're allowed to stay at the university, have the offices, use the lab. And so, that's what we did in 2013.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Actually, that's a really interesting comment. Or
it's the best thing Germany has about founding. Germany is weak in many aspects for startups, also deep tech. But this Exist Founder Scholarship is a very broad and very strong and very successful program. And I know a lot of young founders, nearly everyone founding from university goes through this program. There are 2 variants, actually. We took the smaller one to be a little bit more agile, but it funds you the smaller one 1 year and the bigger one up to 2 years for 3 people, bigger one, I think, up to 4 people. The founders basically get monthly money, but the government doesn't take any equity or something. So after the scholarship has started, you're allowed then to found your company as a corporation, and so you do your stuff, but still paid, and have your office at the university, and have some mentors and stuff like that. And it's a super great program, and it's not very expensive for the state, because it's just some money, like a PhD student, something a little bit less.
Do you apply for?
Yes. You have to write a proposal, like for a research grant. Write a proposal, show your technology, show your business case, show your USP, everything, and then I think 50% get funded or so. So it's okay.
Yeah. And so do they grant you, like, how much do they typically grant? Is it usually like 50,000, or is it more like 300,000? I'm sure it depends, but
back then, no, it's very, very fixed. Back then, the small one was 100,000 for all the 3 together. I think it's a little bit more, towards 150. You get a little bit money for hardware or buying software. Now was not so much. Back then, it was just peanuts. And the bigger program is like 300,000 or something like that. So, but in the bigger program, you often have to give some equity to the university.
Sure.
So that's also a drawback of the bigger one. It's also more for deep tech. And the smaller one is always without any, it's just given to you. But I think it's nonetheless a good return of investment for the government, because, I mean, very early stage funding, especially of more deep tech topics, is very weak in Germany. So you need to get somewhere to get some revenue, to bootstrap further, or to have something to show to investors.
And so then do they allow you to continue to work at the university as well, and so you have a salary?
Yeah, of course, you can have a little bit side job, additionally teach a little bit, but usually the scholarship is okay if you don't want to save a lot of money. And of course, then we also got into a local accelerator, which was just getting started back then. We were in the first batch, yeah, and they're now very big. Yeah, I'm also now in the board of this this environment and so, and they have developed so great. The Cyber Lab in Karlsruhe, it's gone really far. Since 2013, but also helped to get more from the commercial side, yeah, and so yeah, so we were able to develop our commercial product. So we really developed the commercial product in this framework, and so then we were in the beginning of 2015 we were able to sell the first software. You know, it was very important from this, you know, sitting still at the university, building this product in the scholarship and the mentoring, sell the first software, having some integrator program the robot with it. And so this helped us then to get a little bit more government, not grant, but in this case, it's more like a government credit, a small, still very quite small. And so then from then we had 2 years until we did our equity round. We did an equity round 4 years ago at the beginning 2017. But the good thing was we had already quite some customers to show, already some early team and something. So because in Germany, it's very difficult to get, let's say, a good setup on just an idea. You know, it's very, and in Germany, you have to do this more like this out of the university and with these
you have to show
supports. And if you, I mean, we had to develop quite some software, you know, to have a commercially viable MVP basically. And so it was I'm very grateful for this, although there are of course a lot of drawbacks in Germany considering good capital options, but yeah, then we got to a point where we got a very great family office / business angel. Basically, it's a
one more time for our listeners, the name of that program in Germany is called
Exist Gründerstipendium and Exist Forschungstransfer. It's basically Exist Founder Scholarship and Exist Research Transfer. This is basically, but it's part of the same program, just two different options.
Very cool.
So that lets you run for a few years, and then you said you had equity round there. Did you have employees when you had the equity round, or was it still the founders' work?
No. As I said, when we sold the first software, we were able to raise also a little bit government supported a small credit program, some kind. It's basically credit line, which supported us for 2 more years with also revenue, some software revenue, and so to grow a little bit. And then so we felt ready that we could go to a real equity round. This was then even a little bit later, and that was beginning 2017 that we closed it. And we won quite a lot of awards in the year 2015-16, which helped. Also basically got us to know to this person, to Mr. Semmler. So he's our basically main investor, and work very great together because he's also very long-term oriented and is personally, you know, involved. And I think for a company like us, this is a very good setup to have someone, you know, which basically stands behind with their own fund, and so can support also to a little bit more difficult times, and get steadiness, because I mean this is in our domain. If you look around, of course, we've talked also with a lot of investors over the years, especially when the manufacturing oriented robotics. Yeah, it has a certain pace, the market. It has a certain complexity. And if you look at the stories that exist in this market, it's not like you sell a CRM software or something. Yeah, there are some parameters that are very different, and you have to understand it and work with it. And if everything exists, I think you can build a nice production story, but it will not be YouTube, where you will have 1 billion users in a year or something like that. Yeah, so you can grow. Yeah, and if there's a boom time, you grow fast, like 2017-18. If there's industry is not so good in 1920, you take a little bit of breath, and now the boom is starting again. We can feel it. So it has to fit, and so far we were very lucky to have a very great fit, and I'm very grateful for that. And but we were always very careful to look at how this market works and what works there, and there are sometimes a very big misunderstandings. Investors moving into this market without prior experience, and they have expectations that cannot be met in that market. but they also don't see the benefits or some advantages also this market has. And you have to be very careful about that as a founder to have a good match there. And so far we had an absolutely great match. I'm very, very grateful for Mr. Zemler to be part of our team, and that's not how it always feels also in the board. And so far I'm very, very happy with that and glad that we were very lucky to make the right decisions, but also have some, of course, chance luck, very clearly.
Definitely. So what was your first customer? Can you talk a little bit about who your first customer was? Or
it was a system integrator in Spain. A system integrator in Spain using software for a project. And like usually with new stuff, you don't sell the first in Germany. But today, the most is from Germany at the moment. So this has changed a lot. After you are a little longer in the market for a couple of years, you get accepted. And of course, we have also US is still also relevant for us, Western Europe in general. But yeah, it started in Spain, and
Yeah. And so, what was the customer's application? What were they looking to do?
It was some aerospace, some assembly in aerospace. So I don't remember the more details, but something like that. Yeah.
Very cool. So what are your areas of focus now? Where are you focused here in 2021 and maybe into the next, say 24 months as it pertains to your business and what you think customers need from a solutions aspect?
Yeah, so we, of course, our first product and still the main one is the robot programming suite, where you can program with the graphical interface, especially for force or vision-based applications, but also if you have complex offline motion planning. And we added a product, learning and analytics for robots, around 2 years ago, of slow introduction with the beta phase at some existing RPS customers. It's still at the moment not so much learning, still already a lot of analytics, but learning is coming now. And this is a tool which gathers data from the robot. So with our programming tool, we generate robot code. And for the LAR, you can embed code that sends labeled data out to an edge PC or something where our LAR runs with a database. And then we can do a lot of analytics, really process-centric, not just machine-centric, but process-centric analytics. And optimization also of the process of the robot application. And so this is now taking up pace. So we have expanded basically a product from planning, programming, ramp up towards more also monitoring, optimization, transfer of knowledge. And so we have broadened with the LAR, and now we are pursuing a lot more activities into this direction to broaden basically our scope as a software that sits on top of the flexible automation. So that's interfacing with the PLC, doing a lot of fancy stuff at the moment we cannot yet talk about with great, very, very prominent partners. We have, for example, with something I can talk about with Siemens, we are an OEM component in Process Simulate. We're integrated into the planning process of all factory lines, looking now a lot of also to better connection integration with digital engineering. And so we see a lot of integration, because what we see in general, I mean, what the customers have the problem with is, I mean, there is, the hardware, so much different hardware often if you have a little bit more complex application, and then you have a software system running the shop floor and everything. And so in the end, it's always a complexity and integration problem, in some way, if you have a little bit more challenging application.
Sure.
And so we focus a lot of tackling this in a more holistic manner. So we've grown beyond just robot programming to really talking all the customer is burdened with when they have this, automate this step or make this line more efficient.
You find that people are looking not just for the analytics and the data itself, but also to try and help visualize the data. Like, I'm not saying to tell them, and to predict things, right? Which I think is still coming, but, in terms of actually visualizing things in the dashboard or something like that, do people ask for that as well, or do they tend to do that themselves?
No, of course. I mean, we have it in the early incarnations of this LAR, or mainly dashboard functions of different kind, 3D visualization in the browser of certain segments of the operation, where you can compare 100 different runs numerically and visually, and we have all different kinds of visualization options. And of course, then on top, then automatic computations of proposals, how to improve the task, trend prognosis. This is a combination of simple or fancy visualization and more complex calculation. And yeah, people are moving there. They see if they use sensors in the task, they need some way to manage it and to tame it. And that's often not so easy if you don't really understand what's happening there.
Yeah, I see a lot of people ask for, predictive maintenance, but then it may be tough to realize that right now. And so they kind of need to settle on visualizing the data at the very least, and that's kind of one of the big things that I see, moving forward in the industry right now as well. Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, with all the sensor data that you have coming out of your system, that if you label it and present it in a way that's digestible by the end user, it would be impactful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Are there applications that you see that are new this year, maybe since COVID? And I think social distancing is one that I think everyone always brings up. But to be fair, I think that's probably not going to last for too long. Once the vaccine is out, I think that there's going to be a little bit less need for social distancing, obviously for potential future pandemics. I just don't know if that's going to last. Are there other applications that you're seeing now people pursue because of COVID that were not really looked at before? Or maybe it's an industry that's looking at something that was not looking pre-COVID. So application or industry that you're seeing change.
I would pick a third option, ways to work. So we really remote, really even programming, remote ramp-up support, remote maintenance support. People realize that if you have developed an application in Germany and ship it to Korea, probably you could save the engineer flying there and helping the people on site.
Yeah.
You can sit in the office or at home and help them inside through remote tools. I think like what we do right now, these remote tools is something where people realize this could be an option for a lot of engineering travel reduction, something like that. That's what
Very interesting.
What we immediately felt when we have customers working, where we explored and are still exploring options, improvements. Applications per se, not so much. I mean, what of course is absolutely accelerating is the e-mobility, the electric car, and all the components and manufacturing steps that come with it. And that is now for us the biggest growth option, definitely. So because there's a lot of new application types that they get now to the numbers, but automation gets viable, and so there's a lot of applications that have not really basically proven perhaps a little bit, but saturated way of doing it. And that's always an opportunity to come with it with more lean, novel approaches in a broader scale. And so that's what we see as the biggest opportunity for us emerging from COVID is actually really the much faster switch, especially in Europe, from the combustion engine to the battery electric usually, or hybrid electric car. And there's a huge movement now in the industry. As the last 6 to 9 months, it's the big companies have really changed how they work. They can really
Volkswagen, Volvo, they've all come out with pledges.
Yeah, right. The big tier 1 suppliers also, there's a different momentum, there's a different dynamic, there's a different way to tackle things. There's really this wake-up call in industry that was not yet present in 2019, where there was always automotive crisis, has really been given through COVID. Yeah, and it's very nice to see. And
why is that?
Yeah, I think there are factors. One was that during the crisis, also especially the German government put even larger subsidies on buying electric cars for consumers, but also additionally, it seemed that the acceptance for years of Tesla is cool and Tesla here and there and some others already got to a critical level of acceptance when this subsidies really then helped to lift it off to a really relevant level. And if you look at the numbers of electric cars month by month sold last year in Germany, especially, but also in some other European countries, you see the revolution starting, and then everyone came, yeah, okay, we now switch. Volkswagen very big, but also others, and it has this fear of missing out effect and this group dynamic and everything. Of course, there are also some more objective functions, and it moved this industry. So the first time since we deal with the automotive industry, it feels really dynamic at the moment.
I think it's pretty amazing to hear the Volkswagen CEO back it so strongly as well. I mean, Volkswagen, for a time, they passed Toyota as the largest car company in the world. I've been proudly driving a Volkswagen for a while. I love my Passat, and you know, it's one of those things where I think him coming out and backing the EV move really helped out quite a bit.
Yeah, a lot of factors, but it was accelerated definitely by different COVID developments also.
Yeah.
Would you also, do you think that the kind of the craziness of maybe the US stock market and the Tesla share price, I don't know, I think what did it do? Chris, you know more than I do on that, but it's probably 5x what it was, you know, from a year ago. And so I think that probably that might have caught the eye of some of these other car makers to say, hey, look, we really, you know, if Tesla is doing this, like we need to go after this market as well.
More like 20x from like a year and a quarter ago.
There you go. That's right. They're so, you know, I think that probably caught the eye from a, you know, a CFO standpoint.
Yes, certainly. Man, that of course they got, everyone else got afraid that Tesla can raise so much capital. You know, just, you know, give a little. They had this a little bit more stocks, really? 5 billion. A little bit more stocks, 5 billion. A little bit. They had this. I read it somewhere. This instrument where they could flexibly make a little bit, give a little bit more stocks to the market. Yeah, and I mean, if you can just do a little bit, have 5 billion, and then build a big plant or two. Yeah. Of course, everyone else gets afraid and takes you now really seriously. And I think basically the Robin Hood traders also accelerated the switch to EVs. And you can definitely say that. As I said, I think there are many factors last year, but many of them were really at the beginning caused by COVID. The causal chain to the root. COVID is the root, but some other aspects, of course, were like, okay, some acceptance has built over the last 5 years. So it came together perfectly in that sense, as terrible as this was for not just a lot of people in health-wise and other, but also for the economies of a lot of segments. I think the car industry got a renewal, through this process. Yeah.
So I want to jump back to one of the things you mentioned earlier. We touched on the idea of remote connectivity a lot, how that was really the big catalyst or one of the big changes in automation coming out of COVID. Do you think that teleoperation is like considered to be part of that, where, you know, maybe you're not just passively seeing data on the robot, maybe you're not just like logging into it, maybe you're actively controlling it in some ways. Do you see that as something that's come about as well? Is that something that Artiminds is looking into, or maybe not so much?
It depends on the application. On a more classical line on the shop floor where you have a lot more than 100, lot size 100, I see it more like there is someone on the ground, but they need a very close support from a much better expert. Even if everything is intuitive, you know, you always need some knowledge. Yeah, this is a complicated thing, a shop floor. And that's where I see more like this kind of stuff. There are some applications, hazardous materials in chemical industry and on some other stuff where teleoperation can now become feasible with new technology that was too expensive before, where you just use it for nuclear or something for very few operations, where you have sensor and intelligence supported teleoperation. No, but basically the local robot does some control, sensor-based control, emotion planning, and you, the teleoperator, do only coarse-grained supervision. And then you have, of course, a very good complementary system of the local system with a fast control loop, where there's also no problem when the connection ruptures. Yeah, if there's a connection loss, the local autonomy of the system can capture everything. But you do the more high-level intelligence for very tasks that need a lot of flexibility and very different options that we cannot yet model with AI. But me personally, I would always see it as a transitional phase, maybe a 10-year or 15-year transitional period, at some point in these applications, the remote human should be able to be replaced by more intelligence officers.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
think that ultimately there'll be like,
Yeah.
like the
Everyone
global
talks about-
economy will be just completely different in the sense that you'll have people working from everywhere in 20 years from now, and it will, or maybe, you know, you might be a little bit more localized. Maybe if you're a company that really relies heavily on, you know, German infrastructure, that you'll have, you know, a manufacturing facility in Germany, your headquarters in Germany, everything will be local, but then you'll have, when those people are sleeping, instead of running shifts through the night, you might have teleoperation coming from the other end of the globe so that you can, you know, they can be off hours by 8 hours and work through the night.
It's a very good question. Of course, on one point, you have to really make sure that these connections are very, very stable, that you have a very good redundancy, maybe the satellite internet systems, if there are several of them, together with some cables, you know, like fiber optic, together will make this happen. Yeah, I think this scenario would definitely take some time. I think more like, you know, reduction of business travel. I mean, it's more now the more short and midterm scenario, and not just for conferences or for sales meetings, but also for this. That's what I mean. It's also expanding to really site support. Yeah, because I mean that's very expensive, takes a lot of time of the people. I mean, imagine you can do site support remotely in 3 continents. You can probably do the 3 times the volume as if you have to fly by the aeroplane to each of these sites. So I think this is now the short and midterm trend. I think the other things you mentioned could be, I haven't thought about this yet, I have to admit. So I couldn't make a prediction.
Yeah, that's all right. I think another cool thing could be, if you do that, where you can connect with somebody, you can really get the expert within that, whether that's that industry, that product, that solution, whatever that may be, that is very specific. You could pull in that individual wherever they are in the globe. Versus now, I think we're often constrained by who's the most local person.
Yeah, sure, of course. That's a very big part of our offering also to the big companies, although for most it's still a little bit perspective from a strategic point of view, is that you develop a process at one expert lab, and then because it's mostly in software, yeah, although it's all know-how and it's very easy to understand for someone else, and transfer it, that you transfer it, you know, basically the main process now through software. So that was always our idea, even far before COVID. So that's exactly what you say, that they are basically, that you are not so locally bound by having this expert knowledge, experience, know-how, you could say, about certain processes, and that the digitizing it basically, you have to always be careful, man. It's also software, but the idea is to digitize processes. Yeah, and I mean digitize application, and then of course they still need the physical robot. Yeah, at some point in the sensors and the environment. But the engineering is, a lot of the engineering is digitized, and thus it's more transferable, and this makes it more permeable throughout the world, throughout an organization.
So we often say that, like, Germany and Europe can be, you know, years ahead of where the US is from like a cutting edge standpoint. Where are your manufacturers and customers? What is their feeling when it comes to security of connectivity?
Yeah. So it depends on probably on the size of the company, how much redundancy they can pay for. So I know that the smaller ones are very wary about it. The bigger ones, they do a lot of lengths to secure it, but always still they have things like on-premise cloud, and not just the private cloud of the corporation because of stuff like that. I think connectivity is a big issue, and we're always talking about 5G now. But I don't see just 5G. I mean, it's one infrastructure. You need more redundancy of different types, like Starlink, like still having fiber to your main factories, fiber optic. And so, yeah, I'm not a total expert at the current state of these networking aspects, but I see that always. I mean, some entrepreneurs or.
Well, we always have the question of like connecting the robot to the internet, and, you know, should every robot be connected to the internet, or is there a fear of like cybersecurity around connecting your robot or other pieces of equipment to the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have some of our large customers. You have not only a fully disconnected network for production and office and engineering on the other hand, but also the laptops are always so configured that you cannot be in both at the same time. So everything is built by their local IT, that there is no way that the production network which exists is connected to the internet. So and not even to the internet indirectly. So because, I mean, we just saw these exchange hacks and so, I mean, it's terrible. I know some other entrepreneurs who run exchange and they got hacked and had to write all their customers, I'm sorry, we are secure, we give a lot of effort, very, very bad things. And of course, they give a bad light. So yeah, definitely there's a big fear. Should they be connected? I think at one point, yes, but I believe at the moment, basically the software, I don't know, technology, the vendors, the ecosystem is not there yet. The exchange hacks and stuff like that, they show it over and over again. And of course, you cannot secure against everything. I mean, on the political stage in the Middle East, there have been hacks to uranium facilities and stuff like that, which are really okay. Yeah, man, that's something else entirely. But you know, if some automatic tool can hack 100,000 companies or something like that, and if they will hack 100,000 shop floors and extort them, this has to be solved, and this cannot be solved by our community. This has nothing to do with robotics, no hardware or software player. This is something to be solved by Microsoft or by vendor or Amazon or whoever is responsible there, some Linux vendors. So I think
so it sounds like there's the technology side of it, and then there's actual mind share, right? There's the actual barrier to being hacked, and there's the technology side of it, and then there's just getting people to want to connect to the internet because they see those perceived threats, whether they're real threats or really just fictitious, you know. We talked to someone earlier, his name was Rob Goldias from Higher Robotics, and his entire company's proposition is around being connected. And so it was really interesting because like we see a lot that people don't want to connect their robots. He basically said, well, no, it doesn't matter because we sell a connected package. So people know exactly what they're getting when they're signing up for this, and there's no false expectations. So it allows us to not even have to worry about that connectivity.
I think it depends on the size of the company and the culture of the company, of course. I mean, there are, of course, some smaller companies who will say, I mean, I have to stay competitive no matter what. And I have to make a compromise anyways. Yeah, so I have to do it that way nonetheless. But there are some bigger ones who say we can have all the hassle of fully disconnected networks and taking absolutely sure with very, very pervasive procedures, keep it always that way, and it's worth the price, and we can bear the additional effort, and there are a lot of them, for the big ones. And from our point of view, at the moment, the bigger companies are the most interesting market. And so this for our we have also smaller companies, and it works with our product, but and so I think it will say a very relevant topic for the years to come. Let's see how it. But if there's always something happening like this exchange hack now this year, and it doesn't shed good light. It's not just a perceived, it is a real threat. If people can go there, they can be in the network and they can hack from there. Then if it's connected, they can hack onto the robot. It's not just a perceived threat. Then it's things like that repeatedly happen on scale.
And I've heard of some others, with regards to connectivity, where they will have a complete air gap on critical parts of the system. For example, like their safety system might be completely disconnected and like running, autonomously, right? So that they can always ensure that their safety system at least will be disconnected from the internet. But then they connect maybe their data stream or something to be able to read data off the robot or something like that,
that's why we always design our products from the beginning to be locally installed primarily. Even the LAR, it's basically a web-based cloud technology from where you but people use it on the edge PC. Yeah, that's how they use it, and we always developed it that way because we knew we would sell perhaps a fifth only if it was a requirement for the robot to be connected to the cloud, at least to the customers we work with. Yeah, there are certainly some who do it, but it's much less. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Of course, it has also huge advantages if you can use the cloud, but it has to be secure. It's the most important for everything.
So Zach, I was wondering if we could transition to business management and metrics. If you want to go on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, so a fun question we like to ask is every CEO that we've interviewed has a kind of a different answer. I think the easy answer is always like a revenue based, but are there any metrics, like you made comments of 2017, 2018 being very strong, 2019, 2020, it's a little bit weaker, but you really feel the robot industry and manufacturing industry coming back very strong from a spending perspective. We feel the same way. But what do you use as metrics to measure whether it's what's going to be successful and when it's going to happen?
In the healthier business.
And the overall healthier business. Yep.
Of course, every area needs to have their own KPIs, their own metrics. Yeah, of course, in marketing, you can see how many often are we here in German newsletters or in the top 10 most clicked, yeah, things like that, or even the top most clicked or something like that. You have a lot of course, in marketing today options that measure what people really put their eyeballs on. And sales, of course, I mean, it's other typical parameters of the sales funnel. But of course, we are also working a lot strategically with customers. And then, of course, you cannot put everything in a metric. There are discrete jumps, yeah, that you cannot anticipate in a continuous manner. It's not in a linear manner, but something now they have decided that will be spread, yeah, and so suddenly there's a big order coming in, yeah, from a much lower previous basically development line. And but also, of course, things like pre-development, yeah, and research, yeah, so to look there, how much new topics are worked on. So we have also metrics there. So I think it's very important, of course, as you said. I mean, cash is king. Yeah, you need cash tomorrow, and you need cash in 5 years, and much more in 10 years. Yeah, so of course, but everything else is a derivative in the end, or leading towards that. But of course, that in 10 years you have a lot more and sufficiently enough. I mean, you need a lot of different KPIs in different areas. Also, how you build the leadership, the people. And so we have a whole setup there that we always also discussed with our Beirat board. It's a mixture between an American board and an advisory board. And so we try to make it a little bit broad, because it's a complicated field, a complicated market, and just focusing on 2 or 3 numbers that are not that there's good cash and enough cash, it would be too narrow. You lose a grander game, and you need in this industry, how it develops at the moment, what we do in a very sophisticated plan of where you move, what you develop, where you go with customers. Of course, what's very important is also customer feedback, but also there we have some quantitative surveys we do with customers where you can say, okay, how content are they and what features do they want the most next. But also, because it's such a complicated topic, robot, we also do something like 2 days workshop, especially with the power users of our large customers. And then our CTO personally works with them, and you cannot put that so well in a metric, And I think balancing something like hard numbers that you really have to live up to with a more networked or interwoven look onto the big picture, the big strategy, and making this in a well-balanced way. I think this is a way I believe to do it. Is a big it's a challenge to do this well, and it's a very exciting challenge. I like this very much, to always learn there and always try to make this better.
Yeah, you can look at the numbers, but especially as a smaller company or as a startup company, things do not come continuous. And I thought that was a very interesting, very engineering way to put it. That it's not continuous. Things come discreetly at times. Sometimes a big order comes, and you need to be ready for that when it comes as well. And also from an engineering point of view and how technical your company is, the reinvestment back to R&D is an important thing to take note of, whether it's put up there via number or something that is more of a feeling and a directional strategy. That's a very good point as well. Thank you.
So, are there any books that you have read that have inspired you and that have I think a common topic for all CEOs is that reading 100 books or whatever is one of the most important things. But what books have inspired you? Are there any ones that you can share?
And how do you stay sharp?
I wouldn't so much say to inspire, but I think Founder's Dilemma from Noah Wasserman, which I read a little bit before founding, is essential that you don't make some of the very costly and very strategic mistakes. At the beginning, things like the team, things like vesting, equity distribution, things like getting some idea about different opportunities or options with the trajectory of funding, financing fits a little bit to what I said earlier. I read this very intensively, quite a little bit, some months before founding. Somehow I stumbled upon it and extremely helpful. And I would always say every founder should read this before really making incorporated or really starting a couple of months, not too much before, so that it's still fresh and just really trying to understand what it tells you, because I think everything that's said in that book is spot on. And these are exactly the mistakes that you cannot fix anymore. If you make any mistakes, or these the most discussed in that book, you cannot fix later again. So it will be like you waste the opportunity of a lifetime when you make these mistakes. Unfixable. So it doesn't inspire. It's very dry in many senses, but I think it's very true. Of course, there are books like Hard Things that show you that the emotional roller coaster and stuff like that. Even companies that are in a way from revenue have huge numbers and huge names founded, all feel the same. It's good in that. I'm a little bit careful about other stuff in this direction, because the point is that the markets are very different. That's what I also try to say, that the robotics, it's been manufacturing robotics market, doesn't matter if software or hardware, is very different from trying to sell customer relationship management SaaS. Yeah, there are very different things happening and very different opportunities, but risks also very different. And I experienced a little bit to be drawn at some points a little bit in the wrong direction by reading too many books of domains which have very important dissimilarities to our domain. And of course, we were lucky it didn't go too much in the wrong directions, but there were some mistakes we made. So it's very difficult to say, you always underestimate these differences of industries when you just read, because most books come from a certain types of industries, certain B2B or even B2C or platform markets, which are very different. But of course, they always have also good messages in it that are universal. So you have to be a little bit careful, but you should read around. I read a lot of blogs or articles and things like Medium or some founders, the CB Insights or some CEOs, 56 biggest mistakes from, I think it's CB Insights founder. It's always in my bookmarks. I reread it every 6 months or something. Yeah? It's more like these short items where I find myself best, which are quite industry agnostic. Some things were quite industry agnostic. And I'm in I kind of say a software entrepreneur group here in Karlsruhe, much more experienced, older companies. That is extremely helpful. Every month we meet to some topic, and you can mirror. Okay, some are very similar to ours in the target industry and type of business. So this helps me a lot. So I can only propose everyone who has a chance in their region, try to get in a circle like that. It helps you a lot to ground yourself. Okay, I'm not seeing ghosts. This is normal. Yeah, so something like that helps absolutely. So I would say this is actually the most continuous and still to this day thing in this direction that I like now since many years. But at the beginning, some books are often obligatory. You have to read some of the.
Yeah. Read them. It's a great point, though. You almost need to watch out for the confirmation bias that exists with all of these, platform books or industry books that look out across an industry that may be very different than ours. And I feel like people always reach to find the similarities, but they aren't judicious enough to reject, the dissimilarities. And so it's like you have to read the books and you have to know them, but you also have to sit back and say, hey, that doesn't work for us for a lot of reasons. And it's interesting if you ever get in a situation to like, talk to one of those people that write those books. Sometimes you find that, they can't answer the questions that are specific to you. You're like, well, yeah, this works, but hey, my industry sells through channel. So like, I don't think that this would work, and all of a sudden, like a lot of that ethos breaks down completely.
I think an interesting one that comes up all the time is like the software as a service model is very popular in software, and obviously in robotics, there is a lot of software, but there's also a lot of hardware. What is your opinion when it comes to the software as a service model? Will that make its way into robotics? Are you guys doing that yourselves? And where do you see that going over the next few years?
Okay, I would distinguish between SaaS really in a complete manner and basically a subscription model from a financial point of view, but with locally installed software where the customer has still control over which version to use. Because the latter one we are actually proceeding on right now. We're moving more and more into that. So really having basically rental and service fees, recurring revenue. But with on-site installation. So because, as I said, this is internet connection, and also people feel to have the power over their software installations, and so that's not true SaaS. But from an economic point of view, it's like SaaS. And there you have to tweak it a little bit for this industry to work with their procurement methods, but it's slowly getting to working. So it's I believe all software will go towards rental. Software in all domains, software will go to rental, not necessarily SaaS, but to rental, because it's becoming more and more complex, and you need the updates because everything is more interconnected. You cannot have a version that's 4 years old anymore in 10 years. You need to have a nearly up-to-date version, at least nearly, and everything, all the development effort and everything has to be paid for. So it works. There's technical reasons and huge mega trends that push towards that all software has to be rented and service it has to be recurring revenue. But you're right, of course, some customers, there are big concerns, even if they can calculate it's the same price, they are not used to it, and they're used to buy hardware. You buy hardware once, if you don't have a RAS or something like that. But it's moving, and with things like SAP and Microsoft now all going to full SaaS and recurring revenue, it gets into all the budgeting step by step, and it's a change that will not be an unstoppable.
You have to be connected. You have to be connected to the internet at that point.
Okay. You have to, there are licensing mechanisms for that. So we are using for licensing the Vibo Karlsruhe. It's in Karlsruhe. It's a provider of hardware and software dongling. And they have very, very sophisticated methods also to do licensing through air-gapped systems. Also to work with this in a nice manner. But you have to build something, quite some to make it work. We're right there. But from an economic and budgeting point of view, I think that's an unstoppable trend, and that's moving forward. And of course, the industry will get there over the years.
Yep. Any other questions, Chris? I mean, this has been very.
Yeah, a lot of notes. Thank you, Sven. It's an amazing time talking to you. You're a wealth of knowledge for sharing. You've seen a lot through this industry in the last 20 years, at least, since you've been working in it. So.
Any plans to come to the U.S. anytime soon? What post vaccination or?
Automate 2022 at the latest. Let's see how it can be earlier. The last time I was actually Automate 2019. So Automate.
Well, hopefully we'll see you before then. But it would be we'll have to get a beer when we see you there.
Looking forward to it and hoping that everything normalizes. I mean, the remote is convenient, but we miss something. There's always something gets lost.
So, absolutely.
Next time I'm in Germany, I'll give you a call.
Yeah, you're welcome to visit our shop floor, we call it. We have quite some robots in it, because also we do for feasibility studies for customers. So we have quite some, also a lot of URs, quite some URs, and in our training center also URs. So. But also a few others, so I'm happy to show you.
Great. We haven't let you give any kind of a plug yet, but I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to leave our listeners with that they should be looking out for from Artiminds, anything that you, anything back, please go check out their website and check out their products. They're a very sophisticated company, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to bring up, Sven.
Yes, if you look at our videos, software video, our applications on our website, YouTube channel, yeah. So just stop by and have a few minutes watching some nice applications, and yeah. So that's what I can invite you to. And apart from that, yeah, I'm looking forward to robotics. Yeah, it's now moving dynamically as ever or as never before, I think. And I think there will be now a big boom for flexible automation emerging now after this crisis.
I think there will be too. All right,
Once
Sven.
again, thank you, Sven. We
Okay,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.